I want to go over first off some of your assignments. So quiz 3 is going to be due this Sunday. That'll be on TestMoz. I will activate that as soon as class is over. It's 20 questions. You have an hour to do it, and strictly over topic 6. I took it. I got 100. So if I can do it, so can you. And then next week, you have this cumulative wellness assignment. And I want to go over that real quick here. So what you're going to be doing here is you are going to be recording your diet, and you're going to be essentially commenting on really what your diet is like and where you can improve, that kind of thing. There are 3 things you need to turn in with this. You need to turn in a MyFitnessPal report, an eating behavior journal, and your diet analysis worksheet. The MyPlate checklist, actually, this doesn't even like work anymore. So this isn't like even a live link anymore. It's only saved locally. So we're not doing part 3. So omit part 3 to that. So you need to turn in these 3 things. What you'll need to do is you'll need to go to MyFitnessPal, and you'll need to, whatever, do your registering, whatever. All you're going to do is go to the food tab, and you are going to add in whatever foods that you've consumed, well, foods and beverages. So make sure you mark everything. You need to do at least 3 days. You need at least 1 weekday and 1 weekend day involved in it. The days don't have to be consecutive, but you need at least 3 days, of which 1 is a weekday, 1's a weekend. When you're done, you are going to go to the bottom of the page, and it says View Full Report. And you want to make sure that your from and to dates encompass all the days that you recorded. So if I go in here and do that, I added this in on Tuesday. And you will need to print out a copy of whatever this is, which is going to be a lot bigger because you'll have 3 days worth of food in there. So that is all you need to do for part 1. Simple enough, right? The eating behavior journal. This is pretty simple. You're going to take 1 day where you are going to just record when you ate, what food and drinks you had, how much-ish you had, your hunger rating, your location, so where you were when you were eating, the emotions, any emotions that tied with it, circumstances, that can be any other, like, say, thoughts or feelings, if you were with people, if you weren't with people, if it was like circumstantial for why you were eating. The hunger rating, just put a B or an A. B is biological, A is appetite. Biological means you are hungry. That means you have an actual physiological need to eat. If I am feeling hungry, that means that I am eating for biological or physiological needs. If I just want to eat for the sake of eating, like I'm not feeling particularly hungry, that's appetite. So that's more of the psychological side of it. So if you're like grazing on food, if you're snacking, that kind of thing, that would be more of an appetite bit there. And that's it. Real simple, right? Now, part 4, this is where it's going to kind of make or break you here. So this is where most everything comes into play that you have to do. From your FitnessPal here, you're going to use all this information here to fill in all the blanks you have with these micronutrients and with your macronutrients. So you are just going to essentially copy paste there. Where it says met, high, or low, this is going to reflect here. So if you are less than 70% of your RDA, or your recommended intake, you are low. If you are above 150% of the intake, you are high. You need to follow up with at least one idea for each category you were either deficient, or so if you're either low or high in. If you met every one of them, you don't have to write anything because you don't need to make any improvements because you've met all of your goals. So you are only writing improvements if you are low or high, okay? Same thing with the micronutrients. So parts A and B are doing the exact same things. One's for macronutrients, one's for micronutrients. Part C is your eating behaviors. Now, this is where you want to expand more on what it is you actually did and what kind of new revelations you got from your overall eating habits, or what you realized about your eating after you actually were recording it and reflecting on what you've actually done. So this is where I want to see you flesh out some more thoughtful responses, be a little bit more introspective here. And the SMART goals are really quantifiable goals. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time sensitive. You need to list 3 SMART goals related to your nutrition on what you can do to either improve or maintain what you're doing. So an example of a SMART goal would be, over the next week, so there's my time, I will consume at least 1 banana, so that is specific and measurable, every day to improve my overall potassium intake. Realistic means it's possible. I'm sorry, attainable means it's possible. Realistic means you can do it. It is attainable for me to lose 10 pounds in a day, but is it realistic that I'm actually going to do that? Yeah, probably not. Is it attainable to eat a single banana in a day? Is it realistic to eat a banana in a day? All right, so make sure you have at least 3 SMART goals. And that's really it. I don't want you to do a whole in-depth analysis on your diet here. And when you get to 1,500 words, unless your diet is absolutely horrendous, you're just going to be talking in circles or just saying just nonsense stuff to fill in extra words. So instead of writing the 1,500 to 1,700 word proper essay, I want you to do more of an expansion here on your eating behaviors. So think several sentences to a paragraph for each of them. So that's where I want to see the most amount of content. And again, the more kind of reflection or self-reflection for you out of this. Any questions on any of that? All right, so that is that. The cumulative exam is going to be cumulative from primarily everything minus topics 3, 4, 5. I mean, I may throw some little things that overflow in there, but for the most part, we already tested you on that, so I'm not going to just test you again 2 weeks later on the same stuff. But that'll be done in 2 weeks. Your final project here was just changed for all the classes. Now, I don't exactly know how this even relates to our class, but this was the assignment I was given, so that's what we're going with. What you're going to do is post a brief job description or of a job, an internship, or even a graduate school you want to go to. You want to include your current resume, and then you want to have a summary of 5 items you'll work on over the next 6 months to improve your resume. Again, I'm not so sure what the point is of that, but that's what our department chair wants you to do. So what they want, they get, kind of thing.
Is this under topic 7?
Yeah. So this is on week 15. So this shouldn't be all that difficult for you to do. There's not really a whole lot you actually really have to do. The job description or an internship or a graduate school, that's like a copy paste thing. You don't need to put a job description in your own words. It's a job description, it's copy pasting it. Your resume, I mean, well, you might have to do some work to make one of those if you haven't yet. And then 5 summary items. I mean, that's pretty simple, I think. Then again, that's coming from someone who's done it for years. But if you have any questions on that, we'll make sure to go over that in the next couple weeks here. All right, any other questions before we get going?
The application activities?
Yeah.
Are those still due just as normal?
Yeah, so forgot about that, but make sure you get this application activity in. So it's essentially just talking about what kind of changes you've kind of made. So you're just going to write an overall kind of reflection on all these points about your overall diet, eating habits, health in general. As long as you hit all the points on it, that should be good enough. Yeah.
How many of those should there be? Is it one for each week? How many weeks is it?
I mean, I'm okay with you grouping, because it looks like it's weeks 7 to 12. I'm okay with you grouping in everything and summarizing it. So instead of doing 6 of them, just do 1 where you summarize everything over the course of that time. I mean, don't make them too terribly long. Like a page should probably be good enough. Remember, I do have like 50 of you that I have to grade of these. Not complaining because, you know, I did sign up for this, even though they conveniently left out how many of you there actually were. All right, for your week 13 participation, that is in the announcements, and it's also in the questions to the instructor forum. What you're doing for that is you are doing the same thing that you did for week 11. So you were creating a week's worth of meals. The only thing now is that you only have $50 to spend. And we are going to discuss kind of all your results for both weeks next week. So I'll be kind of bringing that to an end next week there. All right, let's get into it. I want to start off with Fad Diets. And when we're looking at Fad Diets here, we're primarily looking at like a get-rich-quick scheme kind of thing. The majority of Fad Diets are going to do what for you, or they're going to claim to do what for you?
Lose fat. Lose fat.
Lose weight. You're correct that you want to be trying to lose fat. However, most of them are going to be essentially the weight loss bit. We'll see later when we talk about safe and effective weight loss, how our bodies are really only designed to lose about 1 to 2 pounds a week. Anything more than that, and you typically start to really lose like water weight, or you start breaking down like say muscle, which neither of which you really want to do. So when you're losing tons and tons of weight, it's not something that your body even likes to do. And we'll talk more about that, like I said, later. Most all named diets are fad diets. Now, this isn't 100% true, but for the most part, if it's got a name, it's usually a fad diet. Some of the more notable exceptions, the South Beach diet, Ketogenic Diet, DASH Diet, Mediterranean Diet, those are all named diets that are good. They have data and research to support them. Things like the cabbage soup diet. If you've ever heard of Jilly Juice, it was this lady from Ohio, and I feel unfortunate that I was raised like in Northeast Ohio, and I was like only an hour away from where this lady lives. Claimed that if you drank fermented cabbage, like, I don't know, a couple, 3 liters of it a day, that it would do everything for you from, you know, making sure you're completely healthy forever, to curing cancer, to regrowing lost limbs from like amputations kind of thing. If you've ever had anything fermented, you know, like fermented foods, like think of like maybe like kimchi noodles or something like that, they are extremely salty. And fermented cabbage, if you were to like drink the whole solution, like the brine that it's in, you would be consuming around about like 10 times of your daily recommended intake of sodium. That can do some real damage to you, kind of thing. Your RDA for sodium is about 2,300 milligrams, and for them, they were consuming upwards of 10,000 milligrams. You get like say uncontrollable diarrhea, then you can also go into a state of hypernatremia, or having your cells essentially shrivel up. So think about like say if you ever had a slug that you poured salt on, what happens to that slug? Well, that can happen to your body if you have tons and tons of salt in you. Needless to say, she's being investigated for malpractice and all that. So mixed results, we'll say. Here's your big thing that you'll see with any of these. If you're eliminating whole food groups, that tends to be a sign of a fad diet. Now, you may ask, well, what about like say a ketogenic diet? Because that eliminates most all of your carbs. And yeah, that's true. However, you're not doing it as an extreme method, and it's also only indicated in certain situations. Meaning that you would only do that to say treat epilepsy or type 2 diabetes. It can also potentially be used for some different mitochondrial diseases or disorders. You would never use it for type 1 diabetes, absolutely contraindicated for that. If you were a power-based or an anaerobic-based athlete, a ketogenic diet would be horrible for you, because without having carbs available to activate glycolysis and give you your fast-acting ATP, you're not going to have the energy to be able to do like say sprint work or sprint type work. You'd be excellent at like doing like a marathon, but your anaerobic capacity or your short-term high intensity capacity would be greatly diminished. So it's one of those things that it only really is applicable and only really works for certain situations. So I want to play a little fact or fiction here. So first off, are eggs good or bad for you? Who says yes, they are good? And no, they aren't. All right, well done there. Eggs are good for you in moderation. The key is that the yolk is where really all the good stuff is. Egg whites, they have some protein in them, some micronutrients, but for the most part, egg whites are like a whole lot of nothing. At the same time, you don't want to be consuming excessive amounts of dietary cholesterol. So you want to limit how many eggs you have. If you're having 1 or 2 a day, that's perfectly fine. If you're having a dozen a day, that's probably a little much. All right, how about high fructose corn syrup is worse for you than cane sugar? So corn syrup's better and corn syrup's worse. Why do you think corn syrup's worse?
It's like processed, right?
I mean, virtually everything is processed. If you have something gluten-free, that's processed wheat. If you have something that's enriched or fortified, that is all processed. All your cheeses, virtually all your dairy is all processed, no matter how organic it is. So processing, and we'll talk about GMOs here a little bit in I think the next slide. But corn syrup and cane sugar are pretty much chemically identical. They both have the same calories per gram, so they still both act as though they're, carbs, so 4 calories per gram. However, corn syrup will actually get absorbed faster, and it also is going to get turned into fat at about a 20% faster rate than cane sugar will. So if you have 2 of the exact same products and one has cane sugar, one has corn syrup, the cane sugar one will be quote unquote healthier for you. Now, the one thing to watch out for even cane sugar is any of your added sugars. So added sugars tend to have just a bunch of extra calories that aren't really going to do much of anything for you. Many of your full calorie pops will have a ton of added sugars. Just look at the label on, like, say, a bottle of Sprite and you'll see. Now, how about Diet Pop's better for you than regular? So, is Diet better? Is Diet worse? I don't think all of you voted. Why do you think it's better?
It's better, I think, in different ways. Like, it doesn't have sugar in it, obviously, but there's more like processed chemicals and stuff that can affect you differently, which I don't know the effects necessarily, but.
Okay. And who thinks it's worse? All right, why do you think it's worse?
Doesn't taste good.
Okay. I mean, that is a valid reason.
It can cause cancer.
Well, you'd hope not. All the ingredients that you consume are thought to be at a minimal amount or minimal risk, or generally recognized as safe. So while there are certain ingredients that have been linked to cancer or potentially are carcinogenic, you need to have those limited just in the manufacturing process. But yeah, that is somewhat of a concern though. I could totally see that. So Diet Pop's not really better for you, and not necessarily for the reasons you think. So yes, you do contain artificial sweeteners in Diet Pop, as I sit here drinking my Diet Dr. Pepper. So aspartame is the main sweetener in this. Aspartame is about 200 times sweeter than glucose. So even though you have an artificial sweetener in there, you have such a tiny amount of it because it's so sweet that it makes up an insignificant amount of calories. So there's probably maybe a half a calorie in here for the whole bottle. The thing that's bad about Diet Pop is that over time, if you continue consuming artificial sweeteners because they are so sweet, they can actually alter your brain chemistry to make you crave sweeter foods. The immediate effect, though, is that it can actually turn on your kind of hunger hormones. So leptin and ghrelin, you don't need to remember those, but it can turn on your hunger hormones to make you want to eat more. People that consume more diet pop tend to eat more. And this is all because your body senses sweetness. When it senses sweetness, what does it think it's getting? Calories. But when it realizes it doesn't have any calories in it, your body gets really upset. And so it demands calories of you. So typically drinking this alone is going to cause you the most problems. If you're drinking this with a meal, it doesn't really matter because you're getting calories elsewhere. Your body doesn't care where it gets calories, just that it does. So drinking this by itself is kind of one of the worst things you can do. Now, I myself get around that because I use Adderall, and Adderall as a central nervous system stimulant is also an appetite suppressant. So I don't have to worry about that because my Adderall gives the big middle finger to my body. All right. Cooking or microwaving foods makes them lose nutrients. Yes or no?
Depends on the food, doesn't it?
Not really. But why do you think that?
I just heard like with tomatoes, like there's more nutrients or something if you cook them before you eat it.
You say you get more or you get less?
More
Okay.
specific things.
Where are they coming from?
I don't know. That's for you to tell me.
All right, so who else thinks yes? Why?
I mean, I use the liquid evaporates, and the liquid has nutrients.
That is exactly correct. You do lose nutrients when you cook foods. Especially these are with like vegetables. So anytime you cook really plants, you're going to make them lose water. Well, your B and C vitamins are water soluble. So the more you cook them, the more you are going to lose your B and C vitamins. A, D, E, K are fat soluble, so you really don't have to worry about those so much. But think about if you ever try to, like, say, burn a live plant, it doesn't catch fire, it like melts almost because there's so much water in there, and the water will evaporate first before it would be really combustible. So same thing happens when you're cooking it. You're letting that water that's trapped in there escape as vapor. Well, along with that, you lose a lot of your B and C vitamins. Yeah.
So as far as like outside of vegetables, so I've heard that like cooking your eggs makes them better. So don't eat your eggs raw because you won't obtain as much protein and sources from them. Is that true as well?
Well, you want to cook your eggs because you don't want salmonella.
Or about like outside of the salmonella? Just as far as like almond and bodybuilders, just drinking straight up eggs for breakfast.
No, not really. So this bit here is kind of one of the premise of what is known as the raw food diet, meaning that foods are not cooked anywhere past, I think it's like 120 degrees. And it's for two reasons. It's one, to avoid the steaming off of foods, or so you don't lose those B and C vitamins, and also so you don't deaminate or denature proteins. Proteins will stay intact until they reach a certain threshold, depending on which one it is. When you say cook foods, you don't like say kill bacteria. You render their proteins inert. So you take a paper clip and you unfold it. And then you say, good luck trying to hold your paper together with that. Won't work. You don't actually like go and burn off, you know, bacteria or anything like that. You take their source of replication, which is their DNA, which is a protein, you denature it or unwind it, and it can't work. So that's all you're doing. The thought is that if you keep those proteins intact, that because not only are you denaturing harmful pathogen proteins, but you're also denaturing your good stuff as well. That if you keep that intact, that it's going to be somehow better off for you. And that kind of shows a lack of understanding of how our body actually ingests proteins, because we don't ingest proteins. You only ingest amino acids. The proteins you put in your mouth have to get broken down into amino acids before they're transported into your bloodstream. Proteins are too big to get through your intestines. So you have to break it down into amino acids. Denaturing it can actually help that process. Now, it could potentially be debatable on whether or not that speeds it up or slows it down, but the end game is the same either way. Now, more on the egg bit. You can't create something out of nothing. If you're cooking something, you're stuck with whatever is initially there. There's no real added benefit to cooking or not cooking any given food in terms of the macronutrient content. So really either way, it's going to stay the same. If anything, it's more of a potentially a delivery issue where you could see delivery speeds of the nutrients speed up or slow down. But that's about all I can think of that would support that. Yeah. All right, fresh is better than frozen. And this should say on a second line that wild caught is better than farmed. So in terms of like fish. So is fresh better than frozen?
Yes.
Yes or no? We got one winner in here. Why do you think that?
I've just heard that. That's true.
If you take fresh foods versus frozen foods, they are equivalent. The freezing process does nothing to harm them or to do anything to let nutrients escape, and it actually preserves them for quite some time. Yeah.
Fresh food tastes better.
Well, that's always going to be subjective, we'll say. But yeah, if there's no accounting for taste. But in terms of nutritional value, they're equivalent. If you take something that's like pre-cooked, on the other hand, that would be essentially worse nutritionally for you because, again, you've already cooked off many of those micronutrients. And then how about wild caught versus farmed fish? Wild caught better? Farmed better? All right, why is wild caught better?
Because it's not exposed to, when they're growing up stuff on the farm, it can be exposed to like different, like whatever, bad things.
You're not wrong there. Why is it better? Why is farmed better? Absolutely they are. So why is that better?
Wild caught would be a more natural diet, which is normally eating, whereas a farm diet, they're just eating whatever to get it bigger and faster.
Yeah, so you've actually made the complete argument for why wild caught is better. But that is absolutely correct, though, of what you're saying. I just think you drew the wrong conclusion to it. With fish, if you are getting something that's wild caught, you are allowing the fish to grow naturally, have their natural diet. However, as you pointed out there, it takes a lot longer for those fish to grow up. And if you're trying to make money off of food, then you want to get more money faster. So when you farm fish, you put them in big pens, and you do have the potential to like overcrowd them. So there is that potential for like disease to spread within them. Now, that if, say, the fish were ever knowingly contaminated with some sort of disease, they would never go to market. But I'm not saying that doesn't happen. What does change is their diet. If you're in a pen, you can't get the same natural diet you would in the wild. You know, I don't care how much, you know, how many little mackerel you throw to Shamu. You know, if you put him in SeaWorld, he is not getting the same nutritional benefit as he does out in the wild. With fish, you want to get them fat quick. So you feed them a highly grain-based diet. Well, how often are fish eating grains in the wild? Yeah, not at all. I don't know how many grains actually grow in water that fish are going to populate. Maybe rice, I guess. But anyway, by changing their diet like that so drastically, you're fattening them up. Fish are generally recognized as being lean types of meat. Most of their fat is oils. So like, you know, your omega fatty acids, your fish oil that you'll take, that is the fat that's found in fish. It's some of the best fats you can have, polyunsaturated fats. If you feed them grain, they have to you're forcing the fish to store fats in solid form. So you get them bigger, quicker. It's a lot easier to sell them, but you essentially turn them into beef cattle, where you have a nice ribeye that's marbled full of fat when it actually shouldn't be. It may make it taste a little better, but nutritionally speaking, and arguably environmentally as well, it's not as good.
So does it change like the nutrients? Like,
Yeah, you're gonna get fish that have a lot higher concentrations of saturated fats than you normally would. And you're gonna get a lot lower concentration of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. So your polyunsaturated fats are gonna go down, your saturated fats are gonna go up.
and we don't want saturated fats.
We do not. You can have some, but you don't want many. And then how about organic is better than non-organic? Is organic better? Is non-organic better? Does it even really matter? All right, why is organic better?
Because you grew up more natural.
Okay. I have a nice little garden in my backyard, and I would actually be certified organic if I were a farmer. But how many pumpkins do you think I got this year?
I would say 5, 10.
Goose egg, because I had a whole slew of aphids or plant lice that just absolutely destroyed them. The major drawback of being an organic farmer is you don't use pesticides or you don't use harmful chemicals like that. So many times pests will run rampant in there.
So as soon as you spray some plant, you consider it not organic.
It depends what you spray on it. There are certain things you can use that are still certified organic. Something like a neem oil, which comes from a particular flower, I believe, whatever. Anyways, it's a deterrent to a lot of these pests, and that is considered a natural product. You can eat it if you really want to. And it's actually one of the things, it's also one of the main ingredients you would have if you had head lice. Neem oil is like one of the most active ingredients in like the shampoo you would get. Things like sulfur you can add to it. Now, granted, sulfur wouldn't taste good, but you can eat it. So that kind of stuff is fine, but it's also a whole lot less effective than putting like a chemical out there that'll kill them, like spraying them with like Raid. That'll kill them dead. But I don't know if I really want that stuff on my food. Why you should wash it off. But in terms of what we're looking at here, The only thing that is better about organic foods is that they are more environmentally friendly. Organic foods tend to be smaller than non-organic. They tend to spoil quicker. Now, again, we can argue about the taste and whatnot. I don't see a big difference. Well, I take that back because the stuff that I grow, that actually does grow, I feel like tastes much more amazing than anything in the store, but that's probably a biased opinion there. But for the most part, as long as you wash off your, like especially your produce before you eat it, it washes off all those pesticides or anything harmful to it. One of the nice things about pesticides, I guess if there is one, is that they're all water soluble. So it's bad if you have like say a commercial pesticide that gets into, you know, like the water supply. That's not a good thing. We saw it happen back in like the 50s and 60s with the chemical known as DDT. And it wasn't until it started decimating the bald eagle population that the government decided to do something about it, because DDT actually wasn't all that effective. The bugs got immunity to it real quick. So what it did was it made it so bird egg shells didn't hold calcium. So the eggs they popped out were like rubber, and they would just like break open, like crack, just from impact of the birthing process. So all these bald eagles were able to reproduce or whatever, produce eggs by the whatever, how many ever they do, and they could not hatch any of them. None of them were viable. So it wasn't until that happened, you know, you go after America's bird, that now we got to do something about it. And organic's also a lot more expensive, so another thing to consider there as well. Yeah.
So organics is environmentally better.
Yes.
But there's not really a difference.
No. Now, I will say though, if you wanted to grow your own food from the grocery store stuff, organic is the best way to go. For example, something like, say, garlic. The garlic bulbs you see in the grocery store, even the non-organic ones, those are like the same size you can get if you're organic. Like that's what they'll grow to. However, there's certain, like say, nutrients that are given to garlic that prevents them from growing. Like growing as in like put them in the ground and growing. So it preserves them longer. It wouldn't do you any good if you put garlic, say, like in the fridge and it starts sprouting, which it will eventually. But if you try to grow a garlic clove from the inorganic section in the ground, you'll probably get a garlic bulb that's like that big. Like the whole bulb is that big. Whereas if you do an organic one, you're talking about getting, you know, a nice big head of garlic kind of thing. Now, GMOs, what's a GMO? Yes, GMO is a genetically modified organism. The FDA doesn't even recognize this term because they say that virtually everything in your life that you come into contact with has been modified in some way or another. So the FDA doesn't even recognize the term GMO. GMOs are not bad in terms of the actual products they turn out. GMOs have a whole lot of benefit to them. Now, again, there are downsides to it. Anything that's like, say, a hybrid-based plant is a GMO. That can produce like different flavors, new species, bigger, tastier, potentially disease-resistant strains of given foods. And that's great and all. Another good thing it can do is it can, like GMOs can actually make foods or plants become adaptable to environments they wouldn't normally grow in. Like we can grow corn in Kenya, which you really shouldn't be able to because of GMOs. Now, the downside to that is when you introduce plants into geographic locations they shouldn't be, it tends to do a number on the land itself. So you can see things like, say, over farming, soil degradation, so a lot of environmental impact with them. That's a potential bad thing. But all GMOs or anything that is modified has to be generally recognized as safe. You can't be given or purposely given something that's going to intentionally cause harm to you. All right, so we've talked about weight loss, 1 to 2 pounds a week. Remember, there are 3,500 calories in a pound. So if I want to lose a pound of body fat in a week, I need to have a 500 calorie per day deficit. If I wanted to lose 2 pounds in a week, I need to have a 1,000 calorie per day deficit. Whenever I change my weight, I can't do 100% of one thing and 0 of another. Meaning, I can't lose 100% fat and 0 muscle. I also can't gain 100% muscle and 0% fat. You have to do it in, like, they both have to occur at the same time. Whenever you lose weight, if you do it the right way, you can minimize muscle loss, but you can't totally prevent it. This is why, if you are trying to, say, lose weight, diet and exercise is the best thing for you. If I just diet strictly, diet by itself is going to be the best way to just drop the weight number. It's not going to be the best way to change my body composition. If I exercise on top of having a healthy diet, I can not only drop weight, but drop more fat and retain more fat-free mass or more muscle mass. Conversely, if I'm trying to put on weight, so if I'm actually purposely trying to gain weight, you can't just gain pounds of muscle overnight. I mean, if you did everything the right way, like clinically, and that's all you did and devote your whole year to it, you'd be looking at between like 18 and 22 pounds of muscle you can gain in a year. For the average person that, you know, gets at the gym several days a week, at most you're looking at about 10 to 12 pounds of muscle gained per year. In a year, yeah. So naturally, if you want to use like steroids and growth hormone, you can put on about 20 pounds of muscle in 3 to 4 months. Like nothing. And you can bypass all these problems where you don't have to actually worry about too much fat gain. Now, your cholesterol levels are a different story, but fat gain you can actually kind of bypass if you introduce a lot more testosterone into your system. Now, things like, say, you know, heart attacks, cancer, gonad atrophy, we'll call it, that those are all potential side effects for that. But when you gain weight, the only way you gain weight is to consume more than what you burn. Well, if I exercise, I burn calories. But if I want to put on muscle, I have to exercise. You see the problem there. So to actually gain my muscle mass, I have to consume excessive calories on top of what I'm going to burn for the increased exercise I do. This is also why someone like, say, Michael Phelps would have to consume like 10 to 12,000 calories a day, because he was training for 6 to 8 hours a day and burning that many calories. Yeah.
I don't think it's possible to consume 12,000 calories.
Oh, it's super easy. Barely an inconvenience. I mean, if you have like, say, any of those like mass builder protein shakes, you can get like 1,000 calories in a shake.
But I mean, like, if you will drink 5 of them a day, you will be no bueno. You will not feel that good. And then on top of it, you have to eat like 4 meals.
Well,
and you have to practice.
You look at, let's say, now granted, it's not the healthiest, but like a Big Mac, you're talking like 800 calories for like a single sandwich. If you get a typical Chipotle burrito, you're looking around 1,000 to 1,500 calories. A pizza, so even if you go like with a hot and ready pizza from Little Caesars, you're looking at close to 3,000 calories for that whole cardboard pizza kind of thing. It's super easy to get a ton of calories. That's going to be one of the things that you'll notice when you do your diet report, is that many times, especially for like collegiate athletes, you'll find that if you're keeping an accurate diet log, your calorie intake is going to be very high. But that's what you need to do because you're going to be burning many of those just from the nature of what you're doing. But yeah, most of your foods are a lot more calorically dense than you think. So it's super easy to put on weight. Now, whether or not that's good weight or not, it's a different story. All right, talked about sarcopenia already. Okay, I didn't get in this on Tuesday, so I want to make sure I got it here today, about the psychology of eating. Is it easier to run for half an hour or to eat a candy bar? Yeah, exactly. Both are going to have about the same caloric impact on you. You take a regular sized candy bar, around about 200, 250 calories. About a half an hour run, about the same. This brings up the saying that you can't outrun your diet. If you don't make nutritional changes, you can't have long-term weight loss, and you can't be successful with it. The underlying principle behind all of it is you need to change your underlying behaviors. So you need to change your underlying unhealthy behaviors if you want to have long-term success in any sort of weight or body change. It is super easy to lose weight. Like, don't get me wrong. I could lose 10 pounds the next 2 weeks if I really wanted to. It's not going to be healthy. I'm definitely not going to be able to keep it off, but I can do it. You ever watch like the show Naked and Afraid? 21 days, you easily lose 20 to 30 pounds. Easy. Just don't eat for 2 weeks.
Well, fighters do it in like 3 or 5 days.
Yeah, it's not healthy, but it can be done. That weight gets put on or put back on almost immediately once you start reintroducing normal, a normal diet into your system. So again, the unhealthy behaviors have to change. So you have to change yourself or else you cannot succeed long-term. Have any of you ever had like a really bad job? Like just a shitty job you hated? All right, and why did you do it? There you go. Perfect example. Well, how long did that paycheck keep you motivated to going there?
Not that long.
Yeah. I loved health coaching. I did it for 5 years. I hated the company I worked for. I took a roughly like $20,000 a year pay cut to become a professor, and I am so much happier doing it. What you get into here is the psychological principle of motivation. You have intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is motivation for a reward. In this case, you do a bad job or you have a job you don't like to get a paycheck. The paycheck is your reward. Eventually, if your mental health breaks down to the point where it just makes your life miserable, no amount of money is going to make that job any more appealing to you. If you got a big raise, yeah, it may make things a little better for a little while, but eventually that fades off. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is the motivation you have within yourself because you want to do something. Anytime you're intrinsically motivated, and this is ubiquitous with life, in any aspect of life, the more intrinsic motivation you have, the better everything will be. I posed this question when I was in high school about why I perceived things easier to learn that I wanted to learn versus the things I had to learn. And it all comes down to motivation. If you're intrinsically motivated, you're more likely to put a lot more effort into something, and your desire to, like, say, understand and retain the material is much higher. The only motivation you have is essentially altruistic. You're only doing it for the sake of doing it. Now, I used to always tell my students, like here, that I would, essentially do this job for free because I just love to teach. And it also help me, keep my sanity from when I was, health coaching. But realistically, I didn't have to make a ton of money here to make it worth it to me to do it. I just enjoyed teaching that much that I wanted to do it. Now, if you ask some of those students, they may have different thoughts, but I was never really motivated by a paycheck. Now, yeah, obviously you do want to get paid. You don't want to do something for free, but at the same time, it was worth it to me. So with weight loss especially, or with any sort of diet or health habits, you have to find intrinsic motivation to ultimately be successful long-term. Well, how do you do that? That's the million-dollar question. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I freaking hate exercise. Kind of ironic, right? How do I give myself motivation to exercise when I really just don't want to?
Just stay healthy so you can live longer.
Kind of, yeah.
You don't like exercising at all?
Not really. I used to. I mean, I used to be like jacked and tan, but I don't really like it anymore. It's annoying. It's just uncomfortable, especially being here. I mean, now it's like okay doing stuff, but like in the summer, who wants to go exercise in the summer here? No, put your hand down. You do not like it.
It's easy to cut.
So you got to find some other reason to do it other than, my awesome dad bod here. I always joke with my wife that, like, I am so happy I'm married just for the sheer sake that I know I never have to date anymore, because I'm pretty sure that I would fail miserably at that if I ever had to. But now as you age and as, things change, your priorities shift. I really don't care anymore if I get a six-pack again. I mean, I did it once and I was miserable with my life for how militant I had to be with my diet and how much exercise I had to do. I'd much rather drink beer and, eat potato chips kind of thing. But what I have now is kind of more of the intrinsic motivation to stay healthy because I have a kid. And fortunately and or unfortunately, your priorities have to change when you have children. Something about you have to be like thinking of them first or something, I don't know. So that's something that I really used as motivation for myself. And now I can do exercise without really viewing it as exercise. So like say, taking my kid on a walk or going hiking with my kid. He enjoys being outside and running around, and I get to use it as an excuse to exercise even when I don't really want to. So that's really one of the big things with that. This here is our actual chemical responses to really any kind of emotional based eating, or really for the most part, like you can view this as any kind of reward or satisfaction you get from virtually anything. You have these afferent and efferent pathways. What these are really just nervous system responses. So when you have an afferent pathway, you are being given a stimulus and then that elicits a response. An efferent pathway means that you have a response coming as a result of the stimulus. So they're just opposites, is all that happens. One of them would say that I am motivated to exercise because it makes me feel good. The other way would say that I feel good because I exercise. Afferent, efferent pathways. How this all works is that you get a release of dopamine when this happens. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's one of your body's natural antidepressants, that along with serotonin. But dopamine is more effective because dopamine is your kind of feel-good neurotransmitter. It kind of keeps you even keeled. Like if you have dopamine released in your system, you know, you feel good, great, whatever. Serotonin, on the other hand, is your pleasure hormone or your pleasure neurotransmitter. That is the one that's highly associated with like addiction. It's the one that releases euphoria kind of thing. When serotonin is released, you know, life is feeling awesome. And that's where, you know, if one's good, 50's better. But you can see how that can very easily, you know, become a slippery slope. Most all of your chemical dependencies are a result of increased serotonin receptor numbers. This is why, like, if you ever hear of people that are, like, say, drug addicts, they talk about, like, chasing the first high again, so you can never get that same first high. And it's all because your body produces many more receptors for serotonin, and it takes more of the drug to give you a blunted response. And that's really how addiction works in a nutshell. You also have considerably more types of receptors for serotonin. So you have 14 receptors for serotonin, you only have 5 for dopamine. And all of really your addictive chemicals act on serotonin levels. So if you're, say, emotional eating isn't going to necessarily get you high, but it will release dopamine, which will make you still feel good. Anytime you can associate an action with pleasure or an action with a good response, what is that going to make your behaviors do? Yeah, that thing. So if, like, say, eating junk food makes me feel good, I'm now using positive reinforcement here, and that's in the classical conditioning sense, like with Pavlov's dog here, to essentially trick my body into releasing dopamine now when I see junk food, and then it will make me crave junk food because I know I'll feel good if I do it or if I eat it, that kind of thing. You see how that can be a very bad cycle. I never hear of anyone that's, like, you know, addicted to, like, rice cakes or addicted to, like, protein bars kind of thing. It's always some kind of, you know, terrible food for you. You know, why can't, like, healthy food be good tasting and also, like, satisfy all those cravings? All right. How do we actually change? Well, this whole process of stimulus control and behavior modification. This will take a whole lot of time to explain. So in a nutshell, what you do is you have to remove yourself from essentially the temptation. If you ever, say, talk to anyone who's in recovery from, like, say, you know, drug or alcohol abuse, if they go to rehab, one of the biggest things that is always really preached with that is that after you complete rehab, you don't go home. Because let's say, like, I don't know, my drug dealer is my next door neighbor. and I go back home, 6 months sober, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, I mean, if the stimulus is right there in front of you, you are very likely to go back into those old habits. That's why usually for like the first year after you get sober, you shouldn't go home. Like you should be cut off everyone kind of thing. Like sobriety, like I say this like I'm a recovering addict, I'm not, but my wife's a social worker, so she does all this all the time. But sobriety is like a really difficult thing if you're in recovery. I mean, when you think about it, like that is very difficult. Now, you look at how this applies to diet and eating habits. What's the stuff that's, or the restaurants things that are over here? The what? Yeah, what's all over there? Okay, let's say Panda Express. That's a good one. Any kind of like, any kind of food like that is going to be super high in sodium. It's really not good for you. I mean, it tastes good, but it's definitely not good for you. How likely are you, if you like to eat there, to actually go and eat there if you walk past it every day? Yeah, pretty likely. So what do you think you have to do if you want to avoid that? Yeah, you need to modify your route to make sure you don't pass it. Now, I know it's easier said than done, but you have to remove yourself from the stimulus so that you can actually form those new behaviors. In the grocery store, if you pre-plan what you need, so having like a shopping list, you can very easily stick to that list. If you go in there all willy-nilly, I mean, you are going to buy everything that potentially looks good to you. I mean, speaking from experience here, I know that going shopping on a whim is not the best thing for you to do. So doing something like that, because I mean, it's not as though you can purposely avoid everything in a grocery store that's unhealthy. But if you stick to your list, what about like eating out? If I go and eat out, even if I go and purposely go to like say Panda, if I pre-plan what I'm going to eat, it makes it a lot easier for me to not only control portion sizes, but to pick something out that's potentially at least a little bit healthier on the menu. So this is what we call risk mitigation. I'm willing to give up smoking cigarettes in favor of vaping. Both options are not the greatest. I mean, prefer you did nothing. But in terms of risky behaviors, vaping is better for you than smoking, depending that you're not using like any sort of black market liquid stuff. Risk mitigation. All of that stuff, when you do all those things all together, it adds up into better overall outcomes for behaviors in your health. That kind of makes sense? Okay. Why does something like Weight Watchers work? You guys familiar with Weight Watchers? Or at least heard the name? What's the main thing with Weight Watchers? What do they do? And circle gets the square. Yeah? Kind of. They do a point system. You get X amount of points. All foods contain this many points. You are allowed to spend as many points as you have in the day on whatever you have. Healthier foods cost less points. Unhealthy foods cost more points. So theoretically, you can eat all junk food, but you're going to eat a very small amount of it. That's not really sustainable, but you get the idea. The other thing they do is that they have these meetings. Do any of you have say a workout buddy? All right, and what does that do for you? Keeps you accountable. Yes, all those are kind of interchangeable words for that. People who have a partner to exercise with are about 94% more likely to hit their fitness goals than people that don't. I'm not saying it's impossible to do it by yourself, but when you have somebody else that relies on you and you rely on them, that accountability makes your actions a lot easier to do. With all these Weight Watchers meetings, you get up in front of the crowd and you weigh in. Like every single person there knows how much you weigh, how much you've gained, how much you've lost, whatever. That keeps you accountable real quick. So that's why something like Weight Watchers works so well, because you have this really high level of accountability. You also have like sponsors, like literally just like you would in recovery, you have that for weight loss. I mean, I feel like I should be getting paid for this promotion, but that's what makes that stuff work. It's the accountability that does it. That's your basic foundation or formula for how you succeed in behavior modification, is you have someone to keep you accountable. And you need to make sure that whomever that is not an enabler. I don't think my wife would appreciate it too much if I were to, like, say, bring heroin home, right? She would keep me accountable to keep the needle out of my arm. I know that's an extreme example, but you get the idea, right? Now, if my wife said, well, whatever, just don't do it in front of me, you see how that's enabling. So, hey man, I just want to skip leg day today. I don't feel like it. Okay, well, whatever, we can just take an off day. Well, that's when it doesn't work. So that's why with something like Weight Watchers, you have several levels of accountability. I like this, this Willie Nelson quote here. So I'm usually not into the whole, like, you know, hippie motivation stuff, but this is essentially how a lot of this in terms of cognitive restructuring works. Cognitive restructuring just says that your emotions are going to affect your thoughts, which are going to affect your behaviors, and it's cyclic. There's a manager at Fired Pie in Deer Valley that I want to hate him so bad, because every time I go there, he's like always working for some reason, but he is the most happy, pleasant person like in the world. He doesn't turn it off. I mean, he is all about being personable, doing exactly everything you would want, like perfect in every way. And I hate him for it. But I can't stay mad at a guy that is showing that much even perceived genuine interest in their job and the fact that they're providing, like, you know, really good customer service there. You ever heard the expression, fake it till you make it? And try this for yourself sometime. If you just go around like smiling, even if you're not in a good mood, if you do that and keep forcing yourself to do that, eventually it's going to actually make you happy. So that's something where you see how emotions affect thoughts, affect behaviors. Even if your emotions and thoughts aren't in the best place, you can fake it till you make it. Your body will actually chemically change to reflect your outward appearance. If you're going around scowling all day, you can very easily see how that would potentially, you know, derail your, you know, thought process there. But seriously, try doing the whole smiling thing. You'll be surprised at what that does to you. So the more positive of thoughts you have, it ends up creating much more positive behaviors. That's kind of the whole gist of it there. All right, spent way too much time on this already. This here is our set point theory. Our body likes the way it is. It doesn't want to change. What this study did was it took people who were on roughly a 3,500 calorie a day diet, and then it dropped them off to like 500 calories a day. If you look at the purple line here and then the orange line. The orange line is what the predicted weight would be of the participants. The purple is what actually happened. So when they cut out 3,000 calories a day, roughly a pound a day, they were expecting to lose over the course of really a month about 30 pounds. They only lost round about 15. This is because when you try to make your body do stuff it doesn't want to do, it fights back. If I tried to lose weight just by severely restricting calories, yes, I will lose weight just because I'm not giving myself a high enough calorie count. But what's my body going to do in response to that?
Feel hungry?
You will. You're going to go into starvation mode. Things like that will definitely happen. But metabolically, what's happening is that your body is going to suppress your metabolism. If you're not giving it calories, it's going to say, well, I'm not getting calories in, so I need to reduce the amount of calories I'm using. First thing it does, shuts down the most metabolically active things you have, your skeletal muscles. So instead of burning the hundreds of thousands of calories you have stored as fat, it's going to shut down your muscles first. So your muscles will start atrophying pretty quick. If you've heard the expression, you got to spend money to make money, you've got to consume calories to burn calories. If you do not give your car gas, how are you expecting it to go? But if I want my car to run efficiently, do I fill it all the way to the brim with gas? No, I only partially fill it up because gas has weight. Weight causes drag. Drag means less miles per gallon. So ideally, you should only fill your gas tank up about halfway if you want to get the best bang for your buck in terms of miles per gallon. You're welcome. With our body's set point, our body wants to stay in homeostasis. If you go too far one way or another, your body fights back. So this is where it takes doing much more than just the diet alone to really lose a whole lot of weight. If you notice with the diet here, this is diet only, this is body mass, this is fat mass, this is fat-free mass. If I am just dieting, I lose the most amount of weight, but I also lose the most amount of fat-free mass, muscle, which I don't want to do. This essentially can make you like a fat, skinny person kind of thing. That can potentially be like just as unhealthy as if you were obese. Many people who are fat, skinny are thin complected, but they have little muscle mass. They tend to have much more visceral or deep fat, which is the kind of worst fat you can have. Everyone has to have it because that's the fat that, like, say, lines your organs and things like that. You need to have a certain amount of it, but having too much of it can be very detrimental. That's the stuff that's highly correlated with, like, say, heart disease, strokes, heart attacks, all that good stuff. You look at exercise alone. Exercise is the best way to maintain your weight. You want to maintain your weight, you just exercise. Because if you look here, they're showing a net gain of about half a kilo for exercise alone, a loss of half a kilo in fat mass, a gain of about 1 kilo in fat-free mass. So that's pretty good, However, if you're trying to lose weight, that's not so good, right? You do diet and exercise, and now you see what happens. Diet and exercise gives me better than essentially the sum of the parts because I lose the most fat mass while maintaining my fat-free mass. So that's why if you want to lose weight, diet and exercise is the best way to do it. For all apparently healthy adults, the best way to exercise is the highest intensity you can tolerate. Now, high intensity does not necessarily mean high impact. Like if I'm 80 years old, I'm not gonna be doing, like, say, box jumps, plyometric stuff. But unilaterally, all age groups of adults who have no other pre-existing conditions should be doing the highest intensity of exercise they can tolerate. However, the high intensity exercise is also the least enjoyable exercise. How many of you want to go and really just bust your ass in the gym and then like throw up and feel like shit afterwards? Yeah, that's real appealing. Sign me up. However, that kind of stuff is the best thing for you. So, unfortunately, to do exercise the right way, it's the most unpleasant. All right, and I want to finish up with eating disorders. There we go. There's two things we want to look at here. Eating disorders and disordered eating. One is acute, one's chronic. Disordered eating is acute. Eating disorders are chronic. To have a clinical diagnosis of an eating disorder, you need to be doing that thing for at least 3 to 6 months. The major thing that separates, or like one of the major diagnostic criteria for an eating disorder is that it has to affect your everyday life. If something's not affecting your everyday life, it's typically viewed as like, say, disordered eating. Disordered eating can develop or transform into an eating disorder, but not always. Disordered eating is if you do things like, say, cut weight. So people who express or have disordered eating tend to be your weight class athletes. People like your boxers, your wrestlers, your fighters, that kind of thing. They cut weight quickly to meet their weight class requirements. If I need to lose 5 pounds in a day, well, I've told you all day today that that's not healthy. It's doable. I can definitely throw on a sweatsuit, go start running around, hit the sauna, whatever, and easily sweat out 5 pounds. Easy. What's the problem with that? Yeah, it's water weight. You're risking dehydration injury, which can be very bad. If you've ever been dehydrated, athletic performance is probably not going to be at its peak for you, especially if you go and purposely get severely dehydrated for the purposes of being able just to qualify for your match. And there's all your nice dehydration risks. Our major 3 eating disorders we have: anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. Anorexia is the absence of calories. Bulimia is binging and purging. Binge eating disorder is binging without the purge. Every one of those, and really all eating disorders, are all classified on the DSM-5 as a psychological disorder. What's one of the main characteristics of people who have eating disorders? What are they trying to accomplish?
They want to look a certain way.
Yeah, body image. For the most part, even if you are on the binge eating disorder side of things, you ultimately have some sort of body image issue, usually. Now, there can also be other different reasons, but that's really the number one issue, is body image. Now, this is stuff, it would take quite a bit of time to cover if we just want to really flesh everything out. So I'm just going to kind of give you the broad points with it. Again, all eating disorders have to be chronic. They need to last at minimum 3 months. It doesn't necessarily have to be continuous, but it has to be regular. And it has to affect your everyday life. Those are the big criteria, or big diagnostic criteria for this. People who are anorexic or have anorexia, you can usually tell that that's problematic, at least as it progresses. Because the lack of calories is going to manifest itself in a very, very gaunt appearance, very slim body stature, tend to be extremely underweight. People who have bulimia, you may not notice anything about that physically, especially now with a mask on. The easiest way to tell if somebody has bulimia is if they're purging via vomiting. You'll see major tooth decay and terrible breath. The other common way you would also see purging is with excessive exercise. Excessive exercise isn't like just going to the gym every day. You're talking about going to the gym for 8 hours a day, every day, kind of thing. And then you cap it off with like eating 30 pounds of food when you get home. That's what that would look like. With binge eating disorder, you still may have body image issues, and usually you do. It's one of those things where it's very common to hear that with people with binge eating disorder that they like say hate the way their body looks, and so they're just going to feed into that kind of thing because the eating reinforces good feelings even though they know it is bad for them. All these contain potential issues. If you have binge eating disorder, you run a risk of primarily malnutrition. And why do you think that would be?
Which one?
Binge eating disorder.
Because you're probably not binge eating healthy food, like nutrient dense food.
Yeah, you're kind of right there. With binge eating disorder, you tend to have a very narrow selection of foods that you eat a ton of. It doesn't matter if you only consumed, like say, oranges every day. You'd be malnourished if that's all you that's all you consumed, because you wouldn't get all of the macronutrients and micronutrients you need for sustainability. Just because you eat pounds and pounds of food at a time doesn't mean you get all the nutrients you need. With anorexia, this one will primarily affect, like, say, energy levels. It'll affect things like, say, female menstruation will be thrown off with it. You could potentially cause really a kind of a shutdown in your GI system, essentially making food more intolerable for you. With bulimia, the eating itself isn't usually the problem, but purging via, like, say, vomiting is very problematic. Vomiting is very harsh on your body. And I'm sure all of you at some point in your lives have done that. It's never something I say that, I love doing. I mean, I definitely feel better if I'm sick and I throw up, feel better afterwards, but I don't really like that act of throwing up. You're looking at potentially having, like, say, GI issues in terms of, like, say, acid reflux. You can have erosions into your stomach, into your esophagus, teeth issue. But the main problem is that throwing up puts a lot of strain on your heart. You can actually put yourself into heart failure or give yourself an arrhythmia, something like AFib or atrial flutter, or even, like, say, potentially like a bundle branch blockage from chronic vomiting. If you do excessive exercise, that also has its list of problems along with it. And again, we're not talking about like exercising an hour or two a day. It's like 8 hours a day, every day kind of thing. Your body is going to just break down. For all you ex-phys people, you'll talk about general adaptation syndrome at some point. And if you don't let your body essentially recover, you're just going to break it down further. The whole reason why you make gains from exercise is you break your body down and then allow it to build itself up. If you don't allow it to build itself up, it just breaks down farther. Here's everything that happens with all these eating disorders. Great. And then last thing I want to cover here real quick is, I believe, supplements. Okay, fat matters wherever fat's located. If it's abdominally based, that's the worst for you. So women tend to hold all their fat in their hips and thighs, better for you. Men tend to hold their fat in their chest and abdomen, worse for you. Total energy expenditure. So TEE, that's how many calories you burn during the course of the day, broken down into resting energy, which is your BMR or your metabolism, thermic effect of food, how many calories it takes you to digest food, and then exercise and other physical activity. EPOC is excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. This is why high-intensity exercise is so good for you, because when you start breathing heavily, it means you're not getting enough oxygen to sustain the activity you're doing. Eventually, when you stop exercising, your body still has to make up for that oxygen it didn't have, so it has to repay it. The Lannister always pays their debts. So you have to pay for your oxygen debt. When you pay your oxygen debt, your metabolism increases. When your metabolism increases, you burn more fats. So you want to burn more fats, you do high intensity workouts, because that's going to burn more carbs during the exercise, more fats after the exercise for a long time, potentially up to like roughly 48 to 72 hours. All right, for weight loss supplements, or any supplement for that matter, supplements are all non-regulated, or unregulated, I should say. Meaning the FDA does not essentially hold them accountable for anything. This is in terms of really quality and efficacy. You still can't sell something that's going to hurt people, and you can't claim to treat or cure something. Those are the two big no-nos with the FDA and supplements. Most all supplements are of weight loss in nature. Now, when you look at, say, medications primarily for weight loss are going to act as either appetite suppressants, or they're going to act as macronutrient absorption blockers. Something like Qsemia, or like I was talking about with Adderall or D-amphetamine, those are appetite suppressants. They make it so you don't get hungry. Ally or Orlistat, those are fat absorption blockers. You take that before a meal, and your body won't absorb roughly 30% of the fats that you consume, meaning that that's about 30% less calories from fat you get during the course of the day. This is also just to show you that this DL-amphetamine and DL-methamphetamine, one methyl group here is all that separates Adderall from meth. That here, CH3, is it. One CH3 group makes you lose your teeth instead of studying better. Medical interventions. There are 3 types of weight loss surgeries you can have: a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, a gastric sleeve, and a lap band. Lap band is the most preferred because it is the easiest to do and most adjustable. You don't alter anything about the anatomy of your stomach. You go and you tie a zip tie around your stomach. It makes it so it artificially creates a smaller pouch or a smaller stomach to fill. You can't eat as much. A gastric bypass cuts out a chunk of your stomach, keeps the rest of it though, and bypasses the rest of your stomach to go straight into your small intestine. You keep the rest of the stomach so you keep getting the gastric juices you need. A gastric sleeve would cut off roughly this much of your stomach, but all this is then like discarded. Gastric sleeve isn't, it's the most effective short term, but long term has the most potential complications because you're actually getting rid of part of your stomach. Indications for bariatric surgery are that you need to have a BMI greater than 40 or a BMI greater than 35 with comorbid conditions, meaning things like, say, heart disease, diabetes, metabolic disorders, something like that. And you have to have already failed at non-invasive means, meaning diet and exercise can't or did not work for you. obviously you want to try the least invasive means before you actually have to do something more invasive like that. And then make sure you go over these sources of veggie proteins. That is definitely going to be on your quiz. All right. Oh, and then also make sure you go over the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. And then you should probably go over the food label rules as well. Okay, so I am already past time. If you have any questions, I will stick around till you all leave. If not, I will see you all here next week.
I'm not sure if you mentioned finals.